Welcome to Milestone Moments, the show where we explore the journeys that lead to success. I'm Sheila Slick, your host and founder of 5 Milestones. In every episode, we will bring you insights from the minds of entrepreneurs, leaders, and experts who will share not just their expertise, but the milestone moments that have reshaped their journeys and led to significant achievements. So if you're looking for motivation, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and discover the milestones that mark the path to success. Welcome to another episode of Milestone Moments in Business and Leadership. I'm your host, Sheila Slick, and today my special guest is Devreen Dixon. Devreen is a JD and CAMS certified financial crime risk consultant with over 20 years of experience in legal services and financial crime risk management. Devreen is also the host of the Compliance Times podcast, a show that explores real-world financial crime cases, delivering compliance insights for anti-financial crime professionals while engaging true crime listeners through narrative-driven storytelling. Welcome to the show, Devreen.
Thank you so much for having me, Sheila.
I got a little bit tongue twisted there, but that sounds fascinating, the Compliance Times podcast. But before I ask you about that, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you and that pivotal moment that shifted your career from legal services into financial crime compliance. How did that transition shape your perspective on protecting institutions?
Wow, that's a great question. Reflecting on that, for me, I started out as a paralegal early in my career, and did that for about 9 years. And there's something about the law; it's all about ultimately compliance with different rules and regulations and things. So when I was working as a paralegal in a global law firm, I realized that was the next step for me, and the next logical step for me that I was very interested in doing was attending law school. So I applied, got into law school, and I actually didn't officially discover anti-financial crime as being a potential career until my third and final year in law school. And that's when I took a couple of white collar crime class, and a class that specifically dealt with the Bank Secrecy Act, which is the primary law that regulates financial crime compliance. So I had the opportunity to, as part of that class, to interview what they call Bank Secrecy Act officers, or BSA officers, at a regional financial institution and I believe it was a community bank. And as they began to share with me their career and what they do to protect the bank, I grew incredibly fascinated with this career option. And so I knew that by the time I graduated, that was what I wanted to do. So I appreciate my couple of law school professors there who introduced me to this industry. And I think basically that's what really shaped my decision to get into this career, because the field specifically involves protecting financial institutions, at least in my career path, protecting them from any sort of financial crime, reputational risk, and just complying with the Bank Secrecy Act regulations. And so all that between law school and having been a paralegal before that, and just taking these, having the opportunity to interview folks in the field before I even got in the field, really shaped my interest and desire to protect financial institutions from financial crime and reputational risks.
So it's financial institutions. Do you ever help small businesses?
Not in my career path. As part of my career path, I have mainly worked at a community bank and a global investment firm. But there are certainly other types of businesses that fall under that financial institutions category, such as insurance companies, which are regulated in part by the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, which oversees financial crime compliance. But there are, like fintech companies or financial technology companies. Those are also regulated. But in my experience, I've worked with a couple of financial institutions, more so than small businesses and things.
So I'm not a banker and I don't have a financial institution, but I'd love one key lesson from your 20 plus years in financial crime compliance and being a paralegal that every person should understand about either protecting themselves or their business or organization, even if we don't work in finance. What would that be?
Wow, just one. That's great to narrow that down. I would say, I think for me, having the through line throughout my career is really connecting yourself with folks who have significant experience in the industry and who can help guide you along the way. I remember just having people in my field as a paralegal and even being in the financial crime compliance and risk management industry, people who were very knowledgeable about the field when I was at my very early stages and who helped me to learn how to become very detail oriented about how to protect financial institutions or to help as when I was a paralegal to help with banking and finance transaction closings and that sort of thing. So I think having mentors is very helpful. It's only one. The other thing, as far as protecting yourself, I think the key is just to stay informed. I think about it in terms of fraud. You and I were talking a little bit about AI earlier, and I think that coupled with fraudulent schemes, coupled with AI, I think it's critically important to help both people in my industry as well as non-financial crime professionals to understand how to protect themselves, to be aware of the different types of crimes that are out there and how criminals are unfortunately using that to perpetrate crimes even faster than what we even can imagine, right? So definitely making sure to be aware to do what you can to protect yourself. And that's helped me being in the financial crime space and even in my personal life as well. So,
Are there specific websites or newsletters, or is this something you're doing in your podcast, which we're going to get to in a second?
oh my goodness, yes. That's actually something that I'm going to be incorporating into my podcast. But otherwise, there are certainly websites that consumers can use to protect themselves, whether it is the FBI.gov. They have an area of their website where if you've been a victim of fraud, then you can file a report through what's called the IC3 website. So FBI website, Homeland Security, they often have red flags that consumers can review and just rely on to protect themselves. I will say AARP is another good site for fraud prevention because they have, I believe it's called Fraud Watch, but that's something they are really just pushing forward because of the amount of fraud that's perpetrated against the elderly primarily, and really just anyone to help protect themselves. So I would recommend sites like those. And if you really want to get nerdy about it, I mean, there's certainly sites like the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, but I think people who are not in the industry may or may not find that kind of boring, but I find it very interesting, and I appreciate the information they put out as well.
Now, even when I travel, I love going into the state departments that learn the risks when you're traveling so that you're at least aware and you feel up to date. So I think those are three great places, even though, sending me over to the FBI is a bit intimidating.
Right. It is. It is. It's a resource. I mean, it's definitely a resource. And it may not be one that the people would readily think about, but it's nonetheless, just having been in the industry for as long as I have, I've come across these sites and I found them to be very helpful. That if I wasn't in this industry, I would direct someone to them.
Well, that's great. So now let's talk about the Compliance Times podcast. What's the podcast about? And I know you've been talking about revamping it. So what does that look like?
So, wow, the podcast was really born out of a wonderful idea from Chris Kremitzos, who runs Podfest. And he gave me the idea based on the industry that I work in to do a podcast about it instead of what I had thought about doing a podcast about real estate initially. But when he found out that I was into anti-financial crimes compliance, he was like, "Oh my gosh, that's exciting. You should do do a podcast about that." I was like, "Well, I never really thought about that. I don't know the first thing about podcasting," but he held my hand, in being the expert that he is, and held my hand in, walking me through how to start a podcast. And I love it. I look forward to continuing. So thank you very much, Chris Kremitzos. Well, the Compliance Times podcast, the full name is the Compliance Times, a deep dive into anti-money laundering, one case at a time. Very SEO rich indeed. Um, it is essentially a single host audio podcast that I started back in 2018. And the focus is examining true financial crime cases and providing compliance insights to folks in my industry like myself, anti-financial crime professionals, while also attracting and engaging true crime enthusiasts. As you can imagine, financial crime cases that are a true crime would be very interesting for folks who are interested in the true crime genre. It's a different take on it, on the true crime genre. I set it up in a way that the show is structured so that it always asks the same three questions. Essentially, what happened in the case, how it was uncovered, and what can I say AFC professionals, meaning anti-financial crime professionals, learn from the case. What they can take away from the case to go back and protect their organizations for financial crime that was described in the true crime piece of the podcast. But I started it because this just goes to show you how I guess I don't know too many people that start a podcast based on something they love doing as their full-time job, but it was something that I thought was fun. It gave me the ability to just to unleash the creative side of what I could do in this anti-financial crime space. And my next steps are continuing the podcast in the format that it's in. But rather than selecting random cases to discuss, I'm looking at doing seasonal arcs similar to television shows that focus on a specific area or specific type of financial crime, and just providing compliance insights to folks like myself who are in the anti-financial crimes compliance industry, and continuing to engage true crime listeners. So between that and creating maybe some short form content for folks in my industry that help them fight the good fight, financial crimes compliance. Those are some of the things on the horizon for me at this point. So more to come, more to come.
Now, do you offer consulting, or do you have any
Yes.
ways that people can work one-on-one with you or in a group setting?
Yes. Consulting is part of that lineup to create. The goal is to put out these different assets, whether it's podcast episodes, some industry insights, and for compliance professionals like myself, and to do one-on-one consulting for their institutions, or perhaps even on an individual basis, whichever works. I want to help the industry help fight this good fight of anti-financial crimes compliance.
Are you changing the name, or are you keeping the same title? And if so, can you repeat it so that we know what to look for in the podcast platforms?
Sure. Thank you for asking. Yes, I am making a slight change to the subtitle. It's currently called The Compliance Times, a deep dive into anti-money laundering, one case at a time. But I wanted to expand the show to go beyond simply money laundering cases. The revamped title will be The Compliance Times, a deep dive into anti-financial crimes, one case at a time. That's more all-encompassing beyond money laundering, because there's also fraud and there's sanctions violations. So yeah, I don't want to limit myself just to money laundering. I want to see how I can help other people to combat this stuff, whether you're in the industry or a consumer.
I'm staying tuned for your
Thank you.
updates. Well, thank you for joining me today, Devreen.
Absolutely. I appreciate the invitation, and thank you so much.
And thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Milestone Moments in Business and Leadership. Until next time.